This one has been running on your channel for 50 years, under a new name every few seasons, and it is not a rerun. It arrives at the in-between hour, in the fragments, wedged between a woman selling a knife and the forecast for a city neither of us will ever stand in. Half a sentence of a far war, a street with a hole in it where the houses stood, a reporter in a vest saying numbers into the wind. You watch it the way you watch everything, from behind your face, and you had it filed by the end of the first week. I was 3 feet away when the filing happened. You did not say much. You never say much. You said enough. In your room the world arrives labeled. I entered it in the first chapter of this book, and I am collecting on it now, because the far war arrived labeled too, the way every war of my lifetime has arrived in this house. The desert ones, the mountain ones, the ones that were over before I was born and have never once been over in this living room. You've never met a war you could not file in an afternoon. Somebody has it coming. Somebody always had it coming. The shows you raised me on issued the hats, white and black, one apiece, no exchanges, and the black cat always goes through the window, and the couch always says so a half second before it happens. He gets him right through the window. And he does. Every time. Every war. Forever. So here is the fable of the bell. I am going to set it down the way I have set down every world in this book, and then I am going to tell you what I have been watching on the crowd's channels at 3 in the morning, and you're going to wish I had kept to the fable. There is a world where the bells only ring for one thing. Its founders saw to that. They came home from the last great war of that world, the ones who came home, and they did not build a monument, because they had marched past enough monuments to know what a monument is for. It is for facing the last war so that nobody has to face the next one. They melted the guns instead. Their old book told them to beat the metal into plow blades, and they went one further, because a plow blade only feeds the man who holds it. They cast bells, one for every town, hung in whatever tower the town had, over the church or the market or the well. And the founders did something to those bells in the casting that nobody in that world could explain then and nobody has explained since. Every world in this book is allowed one impossible thing. This is that world, when a person died in war, any war, under any flag, on either side of any line on any map, every bell in every town swung once, and rang once, and stilled. Not for the deaths in beds, not for the fevers, the falls, the failed hearts, all the doors a life can leave by. Only the fire. Only the deaths that somebody, somewhere, had decided on. For 3 generations it worked, and the way it worked is worth entering exactly, because no law was passed. Wars did not become illegal in that world. They became audible. A war anywhere kept every town awake everywhere, and a country that can't sleep through a war will not attend many. The strokes came into the schoolrooms and the suppers and the beds, one per death, at whatever hour the death occurred, and a child would ask what the bell was, then a father would have to answer, at his own table, in front of his own food, and the answering was the whole machinery. Wars got short in that world. Then they got rare. The founders had made them expensive in the one currency no king can print, which is the hearing of it. And then the far war started, and this is the part you have been watching in the fragments, so check my report against your channel as we go. There was a big king, and beside him, below him, the big king would say, beside him, the map said, a small country. The small country was mostly fields. Its flag was the simplest flag in that world, 2 bands and nothing else. The bottom one the color of wheat cut in time, the top one the color of the sky the wheat stands under. A farmer's flag. A flag that is nothing but the horizon it flies over. And its king was a clown. I mean that as the record means things. He had been a clown by trade, a teller of jokes in the halls, and for years his jokes had said the true things about that country which nobody in a robe could afford to say, and when the old throne emptied and every serious man reached for it, the country looked at the reaching hands and crowned the one man who had never once reached. The watchers in every far town found this hilarious, because it is hilarious. Hold the laugh. A crown is worth nothing when you're dead. The big king had reasons. I am going to give them a full size, because you have given them from that end of the couch, and I am not going to build you a fable with a cardboard opponent in it. We were one people once, the big king said, and that was true, long ago. Before the maps, one people. The way every people is one people if you walk far enough back, which is the trap in the sentence, and we will come back to it. The border is a young line on an old map, the big king said, and that was true too. Most borders are. Their courts are crooked, he said, and the record will not launder it. The small country's courts were crooked, its roads were bad, its papers could be bought. And their king is a clown, he said. Also true. Every word the big king said was true, and the sum of them was a lie, because what he added them up to was therefore the fire. And no list of true things has ever added up to that. The 4 towns could not check any of it anyway. All they had was his face, and the face was everywhere, painted on the gable ends of barns at the edges of his reach, each one bigger than the last. You know that law. It was the second law this book ever filed. The further away a man gets, the bigger they make the face. The engines crossed the young line in the dark of a morning, in the watching country, an ocean away from the fire. This world's whole width away, did the thing it had been trained to do. It started keeping count. You have to see the object, so here is the object. Both armies in that war wore stickers on their helmets, and the 2 practices had nothing in common but the gesture. The big kings came up with the supply wagons in sheets, coming on the back, and they were stars. Silver, 5-pointed, all one size. A man licked one and put it on the crown of his helmet for every enemy he was credited with, and the credit was checked against a book by somebody whose whole job was the book, because a reward has to be issued or it is only a claim. It began as bookkeeping. It did not stay bookkeeping. By the 3rd generation, a helmet was read across a hall the way a face is read, and the ones who ran out of crown had the stars moved onto ribbon and wore the ribbon on the chest, so that a general was a ledger anybody could read at 10 paces. Everybody read it. Nobody once read it as a cost. A man came home and hung the helmet on a nail by his door at eye height, where a guest would have to look at it, and the guest would look, and the guest would count, and the guest would say the number back to him out loud, warmly, in front of his children, and the children learned the arrangement in one evening and kept it for life. The small country stickers were not issued, because there was nobody left in that country with the leisure to issue anything. They were found. A soldier going up a street with a hole in it would peel one off a headboard, or the inside of a wardrobe door, or a lunch tin in a kitchen with no wall behind it, and put it on his helmet, and go on. They were children's stickers, because a child's wall is where stickers live. A duck, a glitter star gone dull, a rabbit missing one ear where the paper tore coming off. Never 2 alike in that whole army. Nobody counted them. There was no book to check them against, and the number was never what they were for. So both armies went into the fire with the dead stuck to their heads. But one wore the dead he had made. The other wore the ones he had failed to keep. And then the far towns took the stickers up. That is the part I need you to sit still for. And nobody in a far town could earn one of those stars. There was nobody there to kill. So the far towns bought them. Sheets of the same silver star, sold loose at the market, stuck on window glass and wagon boards and the front doors of houses that had never once heard an engine. And the other half of every street answered in kind. Printed copies of the found sort, a duck, a rabbit with one ear, run off by the 1,000, every one identical, sold by the sheet, which is the single thing the original could never be. The original was one child, and the wall is gone. You could walk a street in that country and read every window on it. And not one of those stickers was the window's own. Not one of those men had been within 1,000 miles of the thing he was putting on his own glass. There were wagers. There were pins in maps. A line would move on a map, and a porch would cheer, and somebody would go inside for the sheet. Enter what a line on a map is, because the fable turns on it. It moves through 100 kitchens at a time. That is the whole of what one is. The porches were cheering the engines through those kitchens, at no cost to any porch, which is why the picking was so easy and so total. It costs a man in a far town nothing to pick a site in a fire an ocean away. That is not a mitigation. That is the indictment. A wager placed for perfect safety is not an opinion. It is entertainment, wearing one. The clown surprised him. The big king's own criers offer him a fast horse out of his capital, a running clown being better theater than a dead one, and he said no, and stay, and stood in the door of his own house, and the porches did not know how to file that, because nothing goes on a helmet for a man who stays. And the machines of that were a good men of both flags at one fixed rate, and the rate never once asked what anybody was wearing on his head. And under all of it, town by town, the whole watching country wide, the bells rang. All day, some days. All night, some nights. And the strokes came so close together, some weeks, that the towns had a new sound. One long bronze note under everything, under the markets and the school bells and the suppers, under the porches cheering the lines. It was the same count. To the man, the bell and the stars were keeping the same number, and only one of them was sorry about it. The children asked what the bell was, the way children had asked for 3 generations. And the fathers were tired of answering. So the town this fable lives in called a meeting, and I want the minutes read fairly. They did not vote for the fire. Not one man in that hall would have burned a field with his own hands. They did not vote to end the war either, because ending it was not on offer. An ocean is an ocean. What they voted on was the bell. It rang at night, the motion said. It frightened the children. It rang during the wedding season and the harvest and the funerals of people who had died honestly, in beds, and a town cannot mourn its own under the count of strangers. The motion called the bell what it had become, which was a nuisance, and the motion carried by it a lot, and the town looked around for the man who could fix a bell, and every head turned the same direction, because in that town, as in every town, there was one man everybody's head turned toward when a thing needed doing right. He was a carpenter. He was the best pair of hands in that town, and had been for 40 years, and I am going to build him at full size or not at all, because this book has learned what it costs to build a man small. He kept a pew under that same tower and was in it every week. He had framed half the houses in the town and fixed the other half. When the fire started, he had taken the big king's side, and he had reasons, and here they are, in order. Best one first, because his side's best sentence deserves to stand on the page. A short war is the kindest war available, he said, and only the strong side can shorten it. So the quickest mercy is a quick loss. And a man who picks no side, he said, has picked the side of whoever is winning, and just wants his hands clean. That second one is the best sentence his side owns. You own a version of it. I am going to leave it standing, unanswered, for the length of one paragraph, so that everyone can see it is not a stupid sentence. It is the sentence of a man who believes caring and siding are the same act, because he had never once been handed a story that did not arrive with a side already cut into it, and rooting was the only way a boy in a far town was ever allowed to touch a war. He took the job. Of course he took the job. The town asked, and 40 years of his life were a record of what happened when the town asked. He was too old for the tower stairs, and he climbed them anyway, with the wool and the leather and his good tools, and he did what the town had voted for, and he did it the way he did everything, which is the way you do everything. Completely. He wrapped the clapper so it could not reach the bronze. He backed every knot where no eye would ever find him. He fit a collar so the wrap could never slip, and he checked his work against the swing at every angle. And when he came down the stairs the last time there was nothing to see from the square, no mark, no scene, and that night the town slept, and the wedding season went ahead unaccompanied, and the children stopped asking, because there was nothing left to ask about. The silence was built. It was good work. The rope still jumped. That is the detail this world gets reported for, so stop on it with me. The rap killed the sound. It did not kill the deaths. The bell still swung, once per death, at whatever hour the death occurred, because the founder's casting did not run on being heard, and the rope, which ran down the tower to the landing by the stairs, jumped at every swing. A small motion, a twitch of hemp against oak. You had to be standing in the tower to see it, and nobody stood in the tower anymore, except the man who had built the silence. Because a man who checks his work in every season is on those stairs 4 times a year, and there's no season without a war somewhere. He would climb with no tools some evenings, which was not a thing he could have explained, and stand on the landing with his hand flat against the beam for a while. He did not time it, and he would watch the rope jump and count. He told nobody to count. There was nobody left in that town to tell. The not hearing was his own work, and it held, because everything he ever built held. He's up there now, as far as this report knows. The town sleeps. The rope jumps. The old man counts, and holding the count alone is the whole wage his side ever paid. And now the finding, and then the couch. There is a disease in the book he kept a pew for. Everybody remembers it wrong. It does not eat the flesh. The flesh manages that itself, unattended. What the disease kills is the news. The nerve goes quiet, and a man burns his hand at noon and learns of it on Sunday, and the learning late is the whole horror of the condition. And the old book's carpenter spent more of his short time on exactly those people than on anyone else, which I do not think was an accident. A bell is a nerve. The founders had it exactly right, and the town did not repeal their law. You can't repeal a casting. The town had paid its best man to cut the nerve, and called the numbness peace. But numbness is not peace. Numbness is how a body arranges to learn of its burning late. And the big king's best sentence, the one people won, file it where this book files songs. A lie that sighs is never original. Nothing that works is. It is a cover. Somewhere under it is the truest sentence anybody has, the one I have spent this entire book trying to carry 3 feet to my left, and you can always tell the cover from the song by which way the blade is held. Sung true, we were one people once means, so I cannot burn your house, because it is also mine. The big king sang it meaning, your house is also mine, and the proof is the burning. Same words, a note for note. And that is what evil mostly is. In every whirl I have filed from, not a new song, a cover, sung with the blade out. And now the couch. You have said your lines at the fragments, across 4 years, and I was 3 feet away for all of them. So the record has them. They had it coming, you said. That whole country is crooked, you said. Their president is a clown. And that ground was his ground in the first place. The big fellows, they stole it in the first place. And I said my line into the same air, on my frequency, where no sentence has ever once arrived. Nobody's house is owed a fire. Both sentences are still in this room. And neither of them has ever answered the other, and neither of them is going to. And this book gave up on arguments in its first chapter. So I'm not going to argue. I am going to report. Enter this. There is a woman about my age on the crowd's channels, from the country with the wheat and sky flag. I didn't find her because of the war. I had been watching her channel for years before the engines crossed, which is how I can certify what the crowd's channels can never certify, which is that what happened next was not a costume. But one night, 3 in the morning, my hour, the hour this whole book was written in, she looked into the camera and said a name, in a language I needed the captions for, and could not finish saying it. The name belonged to somebody who used to sleep in a building that is now a hole in the street, in a city you have watched from this couch, in the fragments, between a knife and a forecast. I sat in the dark of the library upstairs, in the 494th room of my life, and I watched a stranger fail to say a name, and the captions give out, and none of it needed translating. But that was the bell. The ocean is still there. The fable never said otherwise, and neither do I. The founder's casting simply did not run on distance. Nobody hung a bell in our towers. We built one anyway, out of screens, and it has been ringing for 4 years now, and that night it rang upstairs at 3 in the morning, in a language I do not speak. and I have made this finding once before without knowing it was this one. Years ago, in another book, I put a sign over a door in a basement, and the sign said you are already here, and it has been saying it ever since to whoever gets that far down. Same finding, both times. That time I entered it as a comfort. At this time it comes as an invoice. Enter this too, against me, because the ledger in this book cuts both ways, or it is not a ledger. I have built wars. Between once, rules, maps, factions, little armies in a world I made myself, where the dead stand up when the box closes. It's public, like everything I have ever made. I thought about cutting that from this chapter, and the cutting would have been a wrap around a clapper, so it stays. And enter that I'd have picked sides my whole life. I am not the man in this fable with a clean window. There has never once been such a man. Refusing both stickers is not a shrug, and I will not let you file it as one. I am against the fire itself. Whoever lights it, whichever flag it warms. That is a side, and it does not appear on either pole in the square, and it has cost me every porch I was ever invited onto. And the oldest war I ever picked a side in is the one in this living room. A book is a side. This book is a side. Enter it against me, and then read the next line, because it is the only defense I am going to mount. I never once wanted you to lose. I wanted you to hear the bells. And enter one more thing, as prior testimony, so nobody can say the finding was invented for the occasion. Years ago, in another work, under another name, I wrote a law for a world with two lights in it. And neither could be up without the other being down. That was the condition of that world, and there was no arranging around it. So the flourishing of one was the suffering of the other, permanently, with no version where both got what they wanted. The law did not try to settle which light was right. The law said take turns. I give the whole sky to either one, and you have not won the argument. You have ended the sky, because a light with nothing left to set against burns the world down to dark and then goes out itself. I wrote that before this war. I believed it before I could afford it. The stars were never the disease. The stars are the fever. The disease is the belief that the sky is ownable. And now the part I actually climbed up here to say, and I am going to say it in your vocabulary, because mine has never made the trip. Every house in that far country was framed by somebody. You know this in your hands, which is deeper than knowing it in your head. Some man over there spent his weekends and his knees on a floor so that nothing showed, and hung a door for a boy and checked it in every season, and sheeted and wired and taped and sanded and did the second coat that nobody ever does. 40 years, house by house, the same 40 years you spent, the same trade, the same silence about it. And a war is the only tool ever invented that unbuilds 40 years of that man in one afternoon. You have watched it happen from this couch, in the fragments. A stairwell open to the sky, a kitchen wall standing with no kitchen behind it, wallpaper out in the rain. You of all people can read that framing from 3 feet away. You can see at a glance, through a screen, at 4 in the afternoon, whether the man who put that wall up did the second coat. He did. You can see that he did. And the man you have been siding with for 4 years is the one unbuilding him. And then there is the box, which I have sat beside for 40 years without once counting what is on it. Your favorite kind of movie is a war movie. Not one war, all of them, every front, every decade, the great ones and the ones that are only a beach and a lot of noise. You do not own them, and you have never had to. They are on every service you pay for, all of them, all the time, and you can't have your hand on any war of the last century inside of a minute. And it is the old ones you go back to. The bridge, and the whistling. The brothers, the whole long run of them, more than once. You watch them the way you watch the westerns, which is to say again, and again, and knowing every beat, and saying the good line a half second before the man does. I am not entering that as a crime. A man is allowed to like what he likes. But go back to the first line of this report, because I put it there on purpose. Every other war that has ever played in this house was a rerun. That is what you liked about them. They end correctly, they end the same way every time, and they end at all. In the fable I just told you, a man home from the fire hangs his helmet on a nail by his door at eye height, where a guest will have to look at it, and the guest looks, and the guest counts, and the guest says the number back to him out loud, warmly, in front of his children. Your helmet has been on the wall of this house my whole life, lit at 4 in the afternoon, and I have been the guest in the chair for all of it. I was the child in that sentence too. I learned the arrangement in a single evening, the way the fable says children do, and I kept it for life, and I never once said the number back. So here it is, about 40 years late. It is all of them. You have watched all of them. Here is the argument for you in actual size, because I have made it myself, out loud, to people who were staring at you. A war movie is not a celebration. It is the nearest most of us will ever get to the thing, and the good ones are built to send you home certain that you would never want to be nearer. Watch a few, and you come away holding something you could not have received any other way, and you are more careful with the world afterward. That is true, and I am not taking it back. A man watches a few of them. But you have seen everyone there is, and you went looking for them. Out of every kind of story ever made, across a whole life at that end of the couch, this is the one you choose, again and again, on purpose, for the pleasure of it, and I have never once been able to get that to sit down in me. I have turned it over for 30 years. Something in me steps back from it every time, and I have never managed to argue myself out of the stepping back, and I have tried, because you are my father and I would rather have an argument than a feeling. I am not entering it as a crime. I am entering it as the place I stopped being able to follow you. The man you prayed to had your trade. I filed that 2 worlds back, and it is the one act of classification in this whole book I am certain of. He was a carpenter in a small country in the shadow of a big king, in an occupied province full of crooked courts, the exact kind of place your channel teaches you to file in an afternoon, and the Empire's best sentence for what it did to such provinces was, in its own old tongue, that it was making peace, and one of the Empire's own writers set down the correction with the blade out. They make a desert, and call it peace. A numbness, and call it peace. A silence, well built, and call it peace. Somewhere in that far country tonight, a father is sitting at the bottom of a stairwell with his hands over smaller hands, the way your father's hands once covered yours, and the sky over his roof is deciding. He is not on your channel. He is the channel. And we are begging you, and though he is wide tonight, it has whole cities in it. It has a woman who cannot finish a name. It has always included you, but the count down. And not the big king's count in particular. The count itself, which arrived in this house as a hat, white or black, one apiece, no exchanges, and has been doing the same work ever since under whatever name the season gave it. 40 years of it. Every war of my lifetime filed in an afternoon from the far end of this couch. You are a kind man every single day of your life at the range of one town. I have entered 40 years of evidence and I cannot find the complaint. The filing was never kindness. The filing was the bell wrapped in wool, and the rope has been jumping your whole life, and counting was never the same thing as receiving. One more entry, and then this report closes. You know how the carpenter's story ends. The Empire came for him, the way an empire eventually comes for anything in a small country that will not file itself, and there was a trial in one of those crooked courts, and the crowd picked a side, and the instrument that ended him was carpentry. 2 beams joined. Somebody in that province took the order, and measured twice, then cut once, and did the work. A quiet man, good with his hands, kind of the range of one town, with a family to feed and no say in the wars of kings. The old book does not name him. It names the governor. It names the man the crowd freed instead. It never names the ones who did the work.